Okay, we are live.
Great. Well, I will call the General Committee meeting of Barrie City Council to order. Welcome everyone to our virtual General Committee meeting for the time being. In accordance with COVID health guidance and physical distancing measures, we will continue to meet virtually as Barrie City Council. I am in the council chambers along with the city clerk, who's probably about 25 feet away from me. Members of council, of course, have joined us remotely. Members of the executive management team and the senior leadership team are also on the call, although not visible at all times, available to answer any questions associated with matters for council's consideration during general committee tonight. As always, we will start with the consent agenda. For the consent agenda, I'll read out the title of the items associated with the items on tonight's agenda. That's the staff reports and the items for discussion placed by members of council. Members of general committee can ask that the item be held for further discussion tonight. If the item is not held, the motion printed on the agenda is deemed to be approved on consent, and there will be no further discussion of the item tonight. The recommendation will go forward to city council, but city council is tonight as well. This is a double meeting because this is our midsummer meeting, and to allow the items approved by general committee to move forward in a timely fashion, we'll be considering them tonight. That city council meeting will be immediately following general committee, but we will call for deputations if there are those on the call who have an interest and so forth in accordance with our procedure. Consent agenda, members of council, we have 5 staff reports on tonight's agenda. First staff report is with regards to the Mclean property minister's zoning order request. Final technical comments.
Hold.
Held by Deputy Mayor Ward. The next item is with regards to waterfront access and beaches, the summary of the COVID impacts, and looking forward to addressing growth-related impacts. No holds. That is approved on consent. Next item is the Business in the Parks pilot program, part of our economic recovery plan. Okay, no holds on that item. It is approved. The next item is a status update and funding request for various infrastructure projects. Staff report. No holds on that. That is approved, and I would just note, because I know it will be of interest, that would authorize the the Bell Farm Road project to proceed in 2020. That was a project that back at budget time we had deferred to 2021. With the other 2 projects being further deferred, there is fiscal, and the other project not proceeding, there's fiscal room to proceed with this. So council has given, or general committee has given tentative approval to that as part of this motion. The last staff report on the consent agenda is Bill 197, COVID-19 Economic Recovery Act, electronic meeting participation. Okay, no holds on that item. It is approved on consent. We have a large number of items for discussion on tonight's agenda. That's not unusual for our meeting in the middle of the summer, as items do come up around the city, and ward councillors don't want to wait another month or 2 to address them, and you can hardly blame you. There are a number of items placed by members of council. So the first one is a proposed no parking restriction on Miller Drive. Miller Drive, Dunlop to Edge Hill, placed by Councillor Thompson. Okay, no holds on that. That is approved. The next item has been withdrawn. That was with regards to the definition of anti-Semitism. I've withdrawn that item for the time being to have further consultation with the local community on that matter. So that is withdrawn for tonight. The next matter is an investigation regarding additional parking restrictions along J.C. Massey Way. No holds on that. It's put on by Councillor Kungle. It's approved on consent. The next item, also put on by Councillor Kungle, is an investigation regarding additional parking restrictions along Stanley Street. Okay, no holds on that. It is approved. The next item was put on by myself. It is support for the Barrie Health Accord. Okay, no holds on that. It is approved on consent. We have a review of the parks use bylaw and use of public property bylaws, anti-homelessness. That's put on by Councillor Aylwin.
Hold, please.
Held by Councillor Harris, Natalie Harris. The next item is put on by Councillor McCann, and it is with regards to yard waste collection times. Okay, no holds on that. It is approved. The next item is a review of the Parks Master Plan, Little Lake. It's put on by Councillor Kungle. No holds on that. Approved. We have an item put on by Councillor Morales with regards to parking restrictions on Widgeon Street at Merganser. Okay, seeing no holds on that item, it is approved on consent. And I have an item co-sponsored by Councillors McCann and Kungle. It is with regards to conversion of tennis courts to pickleball courts, and that's at Painswick Park.
Hold, please.
Held by Councillor Jim Harris.
Thank you.
The next item is with regards to the conversion of the Red Path hopscotch / Foursquare court to a pickleball court. That's at Red Path Park. Also put on by Councillors Kungle and McCann. Okay, no hold.
So, excuse me, Mary Lane, just 1 second. I may have held the wrong one. The one I wanted to hold, pardon me, was the conversion of Red Path, not the conversion of Painswick. Apologies if I got the wrong one, talking back and forth.
No problem. So we'll hold this one. And on the previous one, which was with regards to Painswick Park, was there any other member of council that wanted to hold that conversion? Okay, seeing none, that one is approved on consent. And it is to investigate the feasibility of converting those courts. Okay, that's it. So the consent agenda completed. The 2 items that have been held, we'll proceed right away to discuss. First is the Mclean. Yes, the Mclean property minister zoning order. Final technical comments was held by Deputy Mayor Ward. Deputy Mayor Ward, the floor is yours.
I will put it on the floor, and I'll thank the General Manager of Infrastructure and Growth Management for this very important report. The only change I wanted to make was in paragraph 1, if we could include the 2 local MPPs to CC this on. That would be the only change. So if I can move that as an amendment to paragraph 1 to CC our 2 local MPPs.
Okay, so we'll just add the words and the 2 MPPs for Barrie. Okay, on the amendment, any discussion on the amendment? Seeing none, I'll call the question on the amendment. Those in favor of the amendment? Any opposed? None. Okay, that carries. On the main motion now as amended. Anyone wish to make comments? Okay, I'm not seeing any. Then I will call the question on the motion as amended. Those in favor of the motion as amended, please indicate. Okay, any opposed? None. That carries unanimously. Thanks for that, Councillor or Deputy Mayor Ward. That's a good addition, and thanks to staff for their work on this over the month of July. Okay, the only other item that was held on General Committee's agenda was the review of the parks use bylaw and the use of the public property bylaws, anti-homelessness. It was held by Councillor Natalie Harris. Councillor Harris.
Thank you, Mayor Lehman. I will put it on the floor and thank Councillor Aylwin for putting this forward. I just had some questions that I wanted to ask Ms. McAlpine with respect to bylaw changes, specifically referring to, if we're going to regulate living in tents and makeshift shelters, what kind of challenges and risks are associated with changing the bylaw to this? Does it pose any difficulties with our limited resources for potential enforcement, etc.?
Ms. McAlpine.
Thank you, Mayor Lehman. Through you to Councillor Natalie Harris. Our current bylaw prohibits camping overnight. It does not prohibit any camping during the day. given the city's existing enforcement resources, any camping or sheltering provisions are addressed on a complaint basis only, as they're given our limitations that way. In most cases, the complaint may be about camping, but it's generally about behaviors that occur. So whether that's noise, debris or garbage that's smoking on city property, or lighting campfires, often needles that are left behind, those kinds of things. So currently, because of the nature of the bylaw, individuals are given a warning and asked to given time to remove themselves from the property, and then staff go back removing the provisions, which I believe is the intent, to completely remove the prohibition for camping overnight, would mean that there would be no opportunity to address the camping, which is fine, but that would not eliminate any behavioral issues that still came to the forefront. So the things like the campfires would still be a prohibition. The noise bylaw issues would still be a prohibition. However, you may see that people start to occupy properties other than ones that are relatively remote. People may decide that they'll camp overnight in waterfront parks or other areas if there is no prohibition on that. And certainly there's always consequences to any particular provision.
Okay, thank you for that.
Councillor Kungle.
Yes, thank you. Through you, your worship, to Ms. McAlpine. Building on that conversation around consequences to that, it makes me think of a couple of conversations we've been having at a public and community level recently. And although the particular motion talks a bit about park use and use of public property bylaws, I'm aware that the nuisance bylaw in particular has been one where people feel that's an area of concern or might be seen as anti-homelessness. So when we talk a bit about bylaw enforcement and some of those pieces around how our staff connect with individuals in our community, where appropriate and enforcing that bylaw, are there also those handoffs or staff actually engaging to inform, educate, and redirect? Are we making any types of connections? And can you help the public watching tonight and myself understand how bylaw staff are conduits to redirecting or connecting individuals, and are we leaving them better than in any interaction than when we first encounter them?
Great question. Ms. McAlpine.
Thank you, Mayor Lehman, and thank you, Councillor Kunkel. So the use of public property bylaw is the one that's commonly referred to as the nuisance bylaw. They are one in the same. So just for the public to be aware of that. Typically when a complaint is received, the officers attend, inform the individuals of the bylaw requirements, the nature of the complaint, and give them the period of time to vacate the property. There are a number of organizations that are providing assistance to individuals who are in fact living rough or homeless, and those contacts, in terms of the approach that's taken, if a complaint is received, typically the Busby Center, there's a reach out to the Busby Center to let them know that a complaint has been received, so that they can coordinate, either attend with city enforcement staff or can go prior to enforcement staff to provide information regarding alternatives.
Thank you. And one quick follow-up. While we talk a bit about the motion being phrased as any suggestions staff would have around to remove or alter provisions that may be considered, Should that be supported and the motion come back, would there be components in there that would educate us on actual current state of the number of times where there's been a complaint and bylaws gone out, where we're actually fining or not fining individuals? I see potentially this as being a wealth of information in the current conversations that we're having around coupling that, which we usually have around our enumeration status, but also around, does our bylaw as one piece separate and apart from actual procedure and how we're actually interpreting or the discretion staff have. So I'm wondering if that can come back as well, maybe some good bylaw change, but also from a procedural, how is it being implemented?
Through you, Councillor Kungl, through you, Mayor Lehman, to you, Councillor Kungl. Certainly, we can include information in the report. Staff, I'll just be clear, staff don't have, what we would be recommending is wording that would remove the provisions if this motion passes, or specific wording to alter them in accordance with whatever direction council provides. Staff enforce the provisions. We would give you information related to the enforceability of the provisions, where we've actually, the number of occurrences where those have occurred in the last couple of years. Typically, there are not fines issued in terms of sheltering. Those are more of a case of giving notice for an opportunity for people to find alternate locations before they're asked to vacate. There's not typically a fine issued in those particular cases. In some of the other cases, there may be. So we can include that information.
Thank you. I think that would be helpful, and I appreciate that. That's all my questions.
Thanks, Councillor Kungl. Councillor Harvey.
Thank you, Your Worship. My question would be to the mover. I'm supportive of, I believe, what he's trying to do here, but this is a huge endeavor that he's asking staff to do. When you consider the volume of bylaws that we have, the amount of, I would suspect, probably a few months worth of work to try and go through all these bylaws, to pick them apart and come up with these pieces that potentially are anti-homeless. But my question to the mover is, what is your end goal here? Like, are you wanting it to be okay to have people camping on Centennial Beach through the night and stuff? Like, I just want to kind of know where you're hoping to go with this, with the staff's recommendations.
Thanks, Councillor Allen.
Thank you for the question, Councillor Harvey. So first off, the two bylaws that are mentioned in the motion, the parks use bylaw and the use of public property bylaw, those each include two provisions that may be considered anti-homeless. So it's in total, it's 4 provisions across 2 bylaws. So it's not as extensive as a review as you may have thought. The end goal here is really to send a message about what kind of city we want to be and what kind of city we want to live in. Are we a city that will welcome everyone regardless of their social status, their economic status, and is that a message that we're sending with our bylaws as well? Now, it's very likely that this report will come back, and that's why I'm asking for a report. This report may come back and say, this isn't feasible. Here are some of the risks associated with removing or altering these provisions, and that's a decision we can make with the full amount of information in front of us. But the end goal here is to make sure we aren't further marginalizing people who are already made vulnerable by oppressive systems in our society, and to really project an image of compassion and a welcoming spirit as a city. And hopefully with a full report, we will be able to make an informed decision on actually removing or altering them when the time comes.
Just a little follow-up to that, because you kind of skirted a little bit around some of my question there. We just finished having extensive debate last month in regards to tents and barbecues at our beaches because of the problems that COVID has created with a lot of people, whether they're Barrie residents or not, coming and creating potentially a public health issue. Now, my concern with this is that we're talking out both sides of our mouth here. In one aspect, we're telling the general public you can't come to the beach with tents and barbecues, but now you're going to have something that totally contradicts what we've already passed. And I assume it's all going to be directed towards the homeless population because of the wording that you're using here. I just have concerns that we're sending mixed messaging that for the general population, you can't do this, but if you're considered homeless, that it's okay to do this. And that really causes a really struggle in my aspect when it comes to representing our people, because if I was to talk to my constituents, the vast majority of people want our beaches and our downtown area cleaned up a little bit. And that's why we ended up passing what we did last month. And I think what you're asking really goes against all of the principles of what we actually did last month. And that's my big concern with this.
Okay, thanks, Councillor Harvey. Councillor Aylwin.
Thank you, Mayor Lubin. And thank you for your thoughts, Councillor Harvey. Unfortunately, I think you may be misunderstanding parts of the motion, because this motion does not have anything to do with barbecues or tents on our beaches. We actually this evening have tasked our staff to look at making that change of prohibiting barbecues and tents a permanent one. Right now it's just under the emergency order, and we're asking them to look into making it a more permanent change. So I think you may be conflating the two issues here. What we're looking at in this motion is specifically the park's use and the use of public property bylaw, which includes a number of provisions, including salvaging, obstructing under the public property bylaw, and then in the parks bylaw, sheltering. So these are very specific provisions within these two bylaws that tend to be focused on people experiencing homelessness, people living rough or on the street. And certainly I wouldn't want the public to be confused that we're just saying, hey, it's a free-for-all in our parks, because that's certainly not the case. Those specific bylaws around barbecues would still remain in place. That's not part of the discussion that we're having this evening. And you can take a look, there's a link on the agenda item. There was a research project that was conducted through the University of Toronto that looked at these bylaws across Canada, and there's a bit more information there about these specific provisions and what they do and how they may disproportionately target people who are vulnerable and living on the street.
Councillor Harvey.
Again, I very much appreciate where you're going with this, but I'm not misunderstanding anything. This is very clear. I've read it all. It very much contradicts what we did last month. I get you're talking circles here, but I'm still not buying what you're selling. And we have to be fair to all the public, no matter who you are. And we can't create a double standard and two levels of service and two levels of rules, depending on what your social income or like. It just really causes huge issues with where you're wanting to go with this. And I'm quite certain that our general public is not going to be supportive of the direction that you're wanting to go with this, because it's creating a double standard.
Councillor Aylwin, you're up.
Sorry, you were muted. Thank you. Okay. Respectfully, I really don't appreciate you mischaracterizing the motion that I put forward this evening. It is very specific on what it's focused on, and it's not really fair to put out the message that this is, this has to do with the barbecues and tent provisions that we've put in the emergency bylaw. I find it really unfortunate that you continue to mischaracterize the motion to the public. These are very specific provisions, as I mentioned, and I would encourage you to go and look at the link that's in the agenda item, because it's the salvaging provision, it's the obstructing provision, it's the sheltering provision, and it's the disorder provision that we're looking at here, which are very specific things, and they tend to be used to enforce activity of people who are experiencing homelessness. This is not the same thing as someone bringing a barbecue to the beach. That's a separate provision in our parks use bylaw. So I would appreciate it if we could all make sure we're being clear about what we're actually discussing here. And if you do support the intention behind it, I would implore you to support this motion so that we can get back the full amount of information and make a proper decision at that time when we get that report. And if you don't support it, that's a totally valid position, and you're free to do so. But I would appreciate it if we could get the facts straight here. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Aylwin. Councillor Ripp, I have you next.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I guess I have a question for Councillor Aylwin as well. This summer we had a situation at Milligan's Pond where we had a number of people living rough out there, and there were complaints, and various social service agencies got together, and those people were, for the most part, relocated into other locations and provided service. The question I have for you is, especially if we're looking at the whole sheltering question, is it your intent that we would change that so that people could live at Milligan's Pond?
Thanks for the question. Oh,
Sorry,
sorry, Mayor Levin. Thank you, Mayor Levin. And thank you for the question, Councillor Ripa. So the intent is to look at all of the provisions as a whole and look at the potential consequences of those, removing those provisions or altering those provisions. So that's something we would have to consider, absolutely. Now, it's important to note that, for example, having a fire at your campsite in Milligan's Pond, that's not what we're talking about here. That would still be prohibited. The garbage that we were seeing in the vicinity of those camp areas in Milligan's Pond, that would also be contrary to the bylaw, and that's not what we're talking about here. So it is specific to sheltering, and I think that's a conversation we need to have as a community, is that something that we're comfortable doing, is continuing to say to people, you know, when you're in a desperate position and you're on your last option, we're gonna threaten to give you a ticket or make you move. That's something that we need to discuss as a council and as a community, and that's why I brought this forward. And I'm hoping we can make that decision once we have the full report in front of us. Hope that answers your question.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I guess my thought on this is that for these people, it really is a cry for help. And as a society and as a city, I think we need to reach out and to help them. I'm not sure that if we take away the bylaw power that we have that says no camping in our parks, then you know, we're probably not helping them. I'm much more inclined to think along the lines of Councillor Kungel's thoughts, that we need to deal with these people in a very respectful way, but also we need to be able to say to them, look, this is just not acceptable, and what we need to do is we need to find alternatives for them, because in a province as rich as Ontario, I believe firmly there's no excuse, there's no reason for anybody to live outside, and I recognize that these folks, there's lots of issues in their lives, and things are complicated, but I don't think we're doing them any favors by taking away our tools. So I'm a bit reluctant on this one. Thanks.
Thanks, Councillor Riepma. Others who wish to comment? Councillor Jim Harris.
Thank you, Mayor Lehman. I have a question. I'm not sure. We have a few former BIA members on the call, and maybe, you know, and most recently, Councillor Morales was the chair. I'm just wondering, and I'm a newer member, so it hasn't come up in my time, but is there any sense from the perspective of the BIA, maybe ask Councillor Morales, as you've been there longest serving, has there been any interest in changing any of these bylaws from the downtown business owners' perspective, those who are trying to invest in enriching our downtown?
Councillor Morales.
Thank you, Mayor Lehman. I can't speak on behalf of the previous board members. I couldn't speak. There's no formal stance that the BIA has, but if you're asking me my personal interpretation, is this would be a 180-degree step backwards. We're trying to revitalize our downtown, which we've invested millions of dollars into. Businesses have suffered now under 2 construction cycles in 2019 and 2020, and also a 100-year pandemic. We've added an extra an active police officer that's reaching out to the community, walking the beat, getting to know businesses, getting to know people affected and in crisis, and kind of reaching out for resources. So I've never heard this of anybody asking for this. And again, my personal opinion is that's not what we need right now, because let's say that if we move forward, let's say that, and I know Councillor Alwyn said this is just a staff report, let's say it comes back and we implement it. Meridian Square becomes a fair game. Alleys can become a fair game. And again, Meridian Square was a partnership between the city of Barrie and the BIA and private donors. I don't know if those private donors, that was the intent. And one of the challenges and goals we have right now with Meridian Place is programming. We want to activate it. We want to give people a reason to come downtown. And again, I respect the intents of the motion, but echoing the comments that were made before, for the downtown BIA perimeter, this would be Wild West.
Great. Thanks, Councillor Morales. That was definitely my sense, and I don't know if some staff can speak to. Is there a sense and experience from other municipalities, if anybody's done this? I'm not sure if anybody's officially done this to allow camping in public space, but maybe as a question to Ms. Miller. Is there any sense of the impact this might have on developments, residential developments in the downtown core or around areas that could be considered potential encampment areas?
Ms. Miller.
Through you, Mayor Lehman, to Councillor Jim Harris. I think that my understanding of the intent of the motion was to address the parks. So I think it's probably best to leave it back for the report back, and we can address if there's any implications for the downtown. We certainly had a downtown cleanup crew that was part of the operations team last year, and that made great strides. And I think that that has a positive impact as well.
Great. Thank you, Ms. Miller. You know, this is really interesting. I think, and along the themes from Councillor Riepma, I do, you know, hope that our community can be both inclusive and supportive, but also assist people in a different way than allow them to, you know, live in parks. And I think if you roll back the tape on people's lives, I wonder at what point do they aspire to be living in a park in a makeshift shelter? It's just not the hopeful and positive outcome that we expect people to aspire to. And we talk a lot about moving upstream, working upstream and helping people. And we don't want the outcome of people being homeless. Recently, we talked about how we could end homelessness in Barrie. And I think, you know, and there was a number thrown out actually in a report, 60 to 80 affordable housing units. So that would seem much more in reach to spend our time and our staff's investment of time, which is our most important resource, is time, in reports, activities, investments, in finding out how to invest in affordable housing and those kind of upstream options. So, and also we just passed a health accord by consent earlier, which again would do things to address the determinants of health, which include affordable housing. access to food and those kind of things. So, so I also worry, and I've seen it in doing some research as well, that when you promote or permit, you sometimes promote. And I think as a regional hub, for many years, we've tried to, as a community through SCADA, tried to reinforce other communities to have homelessness services for their community. So Barrie doesn't become the default community for all of Simcoe or York or even further. So I think part of the potential unintended consequences would be if we allowed encampments in public places, that we would encourage and support the movement, migration of homeless to Barrie, which wouldn't be our intention. And hopefully people would want to receive services closer to home, which is what most people choose to do. So for those reasons, I think I just can't support going down this road, knowing the potential outcome that I believe Councillor Harvey tried to determine earlier. So for that reason, I will take a pass on going down the road of encouraging this report. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Councillor Harris. Are there others who wish to speak to the item? Councillor Elwin.
Thank you, Mayor Lehman. And I appreciate all the comments that were made by all the councillors so far. And I just would like to address a couple of them. There's been a bit of a shift in thinking, and I'm not a housing expert by any means or an expert on homelessness by any means. But I do sit on the Barrie chapter of the Simcoe County Alliance to End Homelessness. And we talk a lot about what's happening in the social service sector and what best practices are working and how they're evolving and how other communities have solved homelessness and treated people with as much dignity as possible. And so one of the shifts in thinking, that's my understanding, is that we're moving away from a more paternalistic approach where we say, hey, we know what's best for you. We don't want you to do this behavior that we find unacceptable, so just camping at a park or obstructing a sidewalk by laying there or something like that. And so we're going to attach a fine to that and enforce it through by law enforcement or through the police. We're moving away from that to a more empowering approach where we meet people where they are and we say, how can we help you get what you need? How can we empower you to find the housing that you need and that's suitable for you and that's dignified? And the UN Special Rapporteur on the right to housing has done a lot of work on this front, looking at appropriate housing that empowers people to make choices in their lives. And that is actually a solution to getting people back on their feet and helping people really succeed in life. So we're moving away from this, we know what's best for you approach to you know what's best for you because you're living it approach. And that's what this motion is really intending to do, is to get away from that paternalistic approach and say, what, we understand the systems have failed you, and it's not fair to penalize you for that. And it actually will push you further into marginalization if we continue to penalize you for that. So we're trying to move away from that and move to a more supportive approach, and that's what the motion does. So thanks for the opportunity to address those comments, and I hope others will support it.
Okay, thanks, Councillor Irwin. Okay, Councillor Natalie Harris and then Councillor Kungle.
Thank you, Mayor Lehman. Just a question for Councillor Aylman. Just being that you have a lot of parks, obviously, in your ward, did you have the opportunity to talk to residents that lived in close proximity to the parks that may have homeless taking up residence in?
Thanks for that question, and thank you, Mayor Lehman, for the chance to respond. So I actually, it's funny you ask. I did have an email from someone this afternoon who lives in Ward 2, and I believe they live along the waterfront. And they were talking about, some of the encampments that we've seen popping up over the years in public spaces, and they were concerned with the issue of garbage at these encampments. And their suggestion was, hey, how about the city takes over our garbage can, and people can clean up after themselves, but then they still have a place to stay if they need it. And I've spoken to people when the Milligan's Pond situation was developing. I spoke to a number of people who live in the proximity of that area, and the primary concern was about how do we help people get the support that they need. People generally see the harm that's caused by further marginalizing people with fines or the threat of fines. And that's been my experience, at least. And I hope we can have a more fulsome conversation once this report comes back. I'm sure we'll be hearing from members of the public after tonight's meeting, since we've had such a great discussion. And hopefully we'll get a better sense of what the city thinks.
Thank you. May I go again? Thank you, Councillor Aylwin, through Mayor Lehman. That I mean, I understand that for sure. You had some probably really great conversations with the residents living around Milligan's Pond, because that has been a camp area for the homeless for quite some time. And I think it's great that we've obviously been offering and providing social services to those individuals through COVID. And I know that you care very much about providing social services to those people as well. I just want to make sure that, in the parks where people living around the parks that have not been like Milligan's Pond, if they, they have a voice in this too, because that would be a huge change to maybe, the way that they live their day-to-day lives. So I really am also with Councillor Kungle to really improve our communication. And again, I know that you have the right heart and intention for this. I'm just not hearing enough about what the rest of the residents around these parks would feel and how they would feel about that happening. So I think it's just too early to even go into this study right now. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Councillor Harris. Councillor Kungle. You're still on mute. Sorry, I think we just put you back on mute, or you did. Go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you. So I'm enjoying the dialogue, because I think the tabling of the motion has allowed us to kind of enter into acknowledging, yeah, Barrie, through a study, has been seen to have, 2 policies within that, a couple of sections that have been classified through that research study. For me, I keep hearing and get grounded into the procedural, which is really at our staff level of the how. How do we enact the bylaws? And I even struggled and had the opportunity to share that with Councillor Aylwin earlier about what I would pick out of these bylaws to say, omit this word, and kind of give you a suggestion for how to amend it around those suggestions. I do believe they're an effective tool. My concern is we're getting caught in a potential, I think, focus on a change of a bylaw and what that would permit or not permit, versus, regardless of any recommendation back about language, I think the root of it for me is, how do we operate by bylaw? How are we intersecting with individuals on a complaint? And what does that look like around how we connect with people and refer them to services, or help to look at supporting them? I'm not sure if there's an amendment that would work here. And so I guess my biggest question might be back to you, Mayor Lehman, or to staff. Would you, because I don't want to get into the operational side of the how, which is really the staff level. I'd like to stick more to policy, but I see that there could be really rich information that bylaw or how we operate could feed into a metric for the House Accord, could feed into an understanding of what we might want to change or understand as we address homelessness in the city and as we look to support housing stock. So I'm not sure if there's a redirection that would tie to getting the information we're interested in. I don't have a suggestion for a change in the bylaws. So I can let that stand, but I guess my biggest query would be, is there an appropriate or other next step where good information about how we're actually practicing and our procedures by bylaw are meeting the mark or not meeting the mark, and where we would actually want to be looking at supporting our value tied to trying to address homelessness?
Thanks, Councillor Kungle. I think I will ask Ms. McAlpine to answer that, but maybe in doing so, I think you addressed this at the beginning, Ms. McAlpine, to some extent. It would be good to give council maybe a little more information about how often do we ticket under these bylaws? How often are people actually getting a ticket? And how often are they being referred to service? I understand there are procedures in place there, and one of the reasons for the delay in the enforcement at Milligan's Pond was to allow for more time for those procedures. But can you just give us a sense of the general practice? When are we ticketing at all? How many tickets are we issuing? And if not, or as well, are we trying to refer people to service first?
Thank you, Mayor Lehman. In terms of the general approach, the first, as previously indicated, is to work with the Busby Center or other providers of housing to let them know that there have been complaints. Again, we address these matters on a complaint basis only. So if there has been a complaint, there's a contact with the Busby Center to let them know the nature of the complaint, the area, and if possible, to jointly attend the site to deal with the bylaw infraction. And at that point, Busby often provides information related to alternatives. Very rarely are we issuing tickets. It's a notice to vacate the property.
Thanks for that. Councillor Kungle.
Sorry, I had no further questions. I think Claire raised a hand. Did you? But I had no follow-up. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Riepma.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Ms. McAlpine's answer just triggered something in me. I'm sure it's really helpful to give a ticket to a homeless person. Just to me, it makes no sense whatsoever. But I'm really interested in what happened, or what were the results of our enforcement action in Milligan's Pond this past summer. I'd be really interested to know, did we positively impact anybody's life there? What happened with these people? Where are they now? How have their lives changed for the better, for the worse, or not at all? It seems to me that having some little report on that would tell us a great deal about what we do right and what we have done wrong. And that to me seems to be really helpful, rather than doing a bylaw review, which seems to me to be pretty much an academic exercise. But I think I'd be very interested in hearing what the results in people's lives were.
Okay, and I'm sure there is a longer answer than we could do tonight, and perhaps our staff could provide us some of that information as a follow-up, because the situation at Milligan's Pond, of course, is annual and certainly didn't end with the situation that got more attention a few months ago. But I think on the motion that's on the floor, unless there are any amendments, I would like to bring this to a vote. I believe most members of council have had an opportunity to ask questions of the mover and of staff. Are there any other comments on the motion that's on the floor? Okay, if there are none, I will call the question. I believe Councillor Natalie Harris put it on the floor as printed. So with the motion on the floor as printed, I will ask for those in favor of the motion, please indicate. Those opposed, please indicate. Okay, the motion is defeated. Okay, moving on, members of council. The only other item that was held tonight was an item for discussion regarding converting the hopscotch and foursquare court at Redpath to a pickleball court, and it was held by Councillor Jim Harris. Councillor Harris.
Thank you, Mayor Lehman. So pickleball. I'm a newbie to pickleball. I've never played, but I know that Councillor McCann and Councillor Congo have had some conversation about pickleball, and I understand it is a very widely popular and growing sport. And I don't want to get in the way of, I know you've done some work, Councillor Congo and Councillor McCann, it's not here, but on this. So I don't want to in any way impede your progress that you've put forward to date in the pickleball community. But I happen to wonder about Ward 8 and pickleball locations, and we don't have one, and that's fine for now. But I know there's a half-court basketball pad at Greenfield Park, and I walked over today, and unfortunately, it probably needs more than a net and some painting to be a good pickleball court. So it might actually need some tarmac repair, which although not my expertise, I should have brought somebody with me. But so my question was going to be, would you be okay with a friendly amendment just to add in Greenfield Park a half basketball court to that motion, just as far as the investigation of could it be converted to a pickleball court? So that question for Councillor Congo, sorry.
Sorry, and I was on mute. And Councillor Jim Harris, I think you put that on the floor as printed to start with.
Pardon me. Thank you, Mayor Lam. Yes, I did. Thank you.
Okay, and so that would be an amendment to add Greenfield Park. And we are at general, so I'll ask Councillor Congo on behalf of both movers if she's okay with simply adding that to the motion.
I am, through you, Mayor Lehman, maybe to Ms. Cook. I was wondering if that amendment would create a two-part or if it should just be added. So I wanted to appreciate that Red Path was a little nuanced in that it might be able to be bumped up to something that's happening within this calendar year because most of the infrastructure is already there, and it seems we've had some good feedback and discussion with staff about that being a solid potential. So I'm not sure if it's possible to then ensure that any addition doesn't hold up a review of feasibility on, is it Greenfield, Councillor Harris?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, so I'm wondering if to further clarify the amendment, if you're suggesting that we identify staff in the Development Services Department investigate the feasibility and associated costs related to A, converting Red Path in that section, and B, an addition of a pickleball court, I think replacing, I'm not sure if there's any details, but a pickleball court in Greenfield. Because it might come out to be a 2021 push. I'm not sure what's possible.
Yeah, and it could, sorry,
go ahead.
That question for me, sorry. Yeah, I think it's simply the reviewing the potential conversion of the half basketball court at Greenfield to a pickleball court. And I certainly, if it couldn't be done in the same time frame as the already previously discussed courts, that Red Path, then that's fine. I just, if they're going to be doing an assessment, if they could do, there's already existing tarmac there, and I'm just sitting beside tennis courts. If that would be okay. Okay, so just for clarity, I did like Councillor Kungel's A and B there, and B, I think, would just read that, and the conversion of the, we're in the warp drive, there we go, thank you. And the conversion of the half basketball court at Greenfield Park in 2021. Thank you, Marlene. I got that right as a B? Okay. Thank you. Cook, are we okay with that?
Yes, Mayor Lehman.
That's the two of us. Even though the microphones are pointed the other direction. Anyway, okay, members of General Committee, the motion's on the floor with the A and B as added. Any further comments or questions around this motion? Okay, seeing none, I'll call the question. Those in favor of the item, please indicate. Anyone opposed? None. That carries. Okay, thanks, members of General Committee. That completes the items that were held. It brings us to the inquiries. Deputy Mayor Ward, I thought we would do these actually at City Council since we have a double meeting tonight. So the only inquiry or announcement matter that I was going to indicate is just if there's anyone listening or watching tonight who is in support or opposition to the recommendations from today's general committee meeting and would like to make a deputation to City Council, please email cityclerks@barrie.ca now, and our clerk will add you to the deputation list for City Council, which we will be beginning shortly. So again, if there's anyone watching tonight who wishes to make a deputation in support or opposition to the recommendations from today's general committee, please email cityclerks@barrie.ca right now. Comments on the circulation lists. Members of general committee, we have a number of circulation lists that are on tonight's agenda. That starts with July 13th. Any items from the July 13th circulation list? Okay, seeing none. July 16th, anyone from July 16th? Okay, seeing none. July 23rd. Okay, seeing none. July 30th. All right, and I will try finally tonight's August 10th. Any items from, there we go. Councillor Kungl and then Deputy Mayor Ward. Go ahead, Councillor Kungl.
Thank you. Just briefly, I was looking at A3 200810, the memorandum from Ms. Schlichter around the pedestrianization of Dunlop Street pilot update.
Okay, and what did you want to do with that?
Could we hold it? I have a quick question regarding a piece that I believe was tied to it related to bike racks for the downtown.
Of course, go ahead. Is Ms. Schlichter's available? Go ahead, Councillor Kungl.
Great, thank you. Through you to Ms. Schlichter, I know the report, I didn't find that it mentioned anything about the bike racks, and seeing that there was a proposal there for a bit of a different approach through this fall, but wondering if you could correct my memory or allow an update for the public and council with respects to, I think the intention that staff was going to look at the placement and a communication update around where bike racks would be placed in the downtown as part of not just pedestrianization of it, but also attracting our cyclists. And I know we've got lots of residents enjoying our patios and some have been biking down there, but have vocalized hoping that that was still something that was going to be made possible. Would you be in a position to speak to that or relay an update at a later date?
Ms. Schlichter.
Thank you, Mayor Lehman, through you to Councillor Kungl. It's certainly something we can discuss with the BIA. I would need to follow up with further communication to provide more details, but I do recollect that conversation and direction, and I believe we were looking at it as part of pedestrianization, but we will need to report back.
Great, thank you.
All right, thanks, Councillor Kungl. Deputy Mayor Ward.
Yeah, tonight's C2, which is letter from Springwater Township about yet another seniors community on the edge of Barrie. And in fact, I'm glad that they've asked us for our input, but there's even less information we had on the other one. I don't know if it's 100 units or 1,000 units. There's really not information. So I guess two things. Could I get a memo back from staff on exactly what they're asking and then what our next step should be? They're asking, you actually said, the Township of Springwater respectfully requests the City of Barrie City Council, in support of the proposed project, provide directions to city staff to work with Springwater staff. So I guess I'm looking for some direction from staff as to what we should be doing about this and more information on it. So if we can get maybe a memo on what steps we should be taking with this.
All right, I'm seeing Ms. Miller nodding. I'm not sure we need to give any further direction, Ms. Miller. That's something you could provide to General Committee. Okay, that would be appreciated. It's astonishing the number of things that are popping up, and yes, they come in at different times in different ways. So that would be, I'm sure, much appreciated. Thanks, Deputy Mayor Ward. Are there other comments on tonight's circulation list? Okay, seeing none. Thank you, members of General Committee. That completes General Committee's agenda. We're going to take a 10-minute recess to allow the clerk to prepare City Council reports. We do have Planning Committee beginning at 7 p.m., so we will attempt to move through all of the Council agenda. But so if I can ask members to come back on in about 7 or 8 minutes at 10 minutes after 6, we will get started promptly in 10 minutes time. General Committee is adjourned. Thank you very much. Folks, I'll just ask you to come back into the meeting as we will get started in a minute.
I'm here, Mayor Lehman. If Mr. Nolan can turn my video on, it won't let me. It says the host turned it off. I disappeared at the end of the last one because my power flickered.
It's in no way a commentary on that, sir.
Sorry, Councillor Harvey, you happen to be the screen it locked in on when everyone else left, so it just kind of looked like it was spying on you.
Oh, okay. Let's try it again. Yeah, it still won't let me start my video. There we go. Not that you wanted to see me anyway.
That's great. All right, Mr. Nolan, I think we're good to get started.
Yep, we're still live, so we can start whenever you guys are ready.
Okay.
Please rise as you are able. I now call this meeting of City Council to order.
We acknowledge that this meeting is taking place on the traditional land of the Anishinaabe people. The Anishinaabe include the Odawa, Ojibwe, and Potawatomi nations, collectively known as the Three Fires Confederacy. We're dedicated to honoring Indigenous history and culture and committed to moving forward in the spirit of reconciliation and respect with all First Nations, Métis, and Inuit people. You may be seated. Welcome everyone to our virtual City Council meeting. As mentioned at the beginning of General Committee, we are observing the health unit guidance and distancing. Myself and the clerk are in the chambers. Members of the executive management team are on the call, and members of council are, of course, joining us via video conference. The first item on the council agenda tonight is confirmation of the minutes. The minutes of the City Council meetings held June 29th and July 13th have been circulated. That was the special meeting on July 13th. Are there any corrections to the minutes? Seeing none, the minutes are adopted as printed and circulated. We have no awards or recognition matters or reports from officers tonight. We did have one request for a deputation on the committee reports. It is from Mr. Al McNair with regards to staff report DEV 2520 regarding the Mclean's Minister's zoning order. I will now call on Mr. McNair on behalf of Nature Berry to deliver his deputation. Please note, Mr. McNair, in accordance with our procedural bylaw, a maximum of 5 minutes is permitted for the deputation. Welcome to council, and the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mayor Lehman. Mayor Lehman and members of Berry Council, I'm speaking tonight on behalf of Nature Berry, a local naturalist and conservation organization. Nature Berry strongly objects to the recent practice by the provincial government of approving ministers' zoning orders under the Planning Act to arbitrarily pre-zone lands to allow certain development projects. This circumvents the statutory municipal planning approval process, including its normal checks and balances which exist to protect the public interest. We strongly support tonight's city staff report, as approved by General Committee, opposing the Mclean Farm zoning order proposal. In my experience as a professional land use planner since 1970, zoning orders have been used sparingly by past governments, most often to control unfettered land development where local municipal land use controls were either deficient or non-existent. The direction for planning in Ontario for most of the last 20 years has been that it should be policy-led rather than development-driven. Hence, the growth plan and the provincial policy statement were developed to guide planning, particularly in central Ontario, building on the Smart Growth Initiative to contain urban sprawl, which was started by the former Harris government. The current use of zoning orders creates a number of serious concerns, including the following. They make totally arbitrary decisions about the principle of what lands should be allowed to develop and where. They can totally ignore existing approved provincial, county, and municipal planning policies and municipal zoning bylaws. They deny neighbors and the local community an opportunity for public input into the critical planning decision that will establish the principle of development on the lands. They deny the use of the established appeal processes under the Planning Act to test the accuracy of the proponent's technical studies before the principle of development is established. There's no requirement for any development to justify itself and have that justification challenged. They can be used to cut off an existing appeal process, even when it's supported by sound peer review of important environmental and/or other technical studies. They create the appearance of political bias in favor of the chosen landowner. And they create huge windfall profits for the chosen landowner as soon as the zoning order is approved. For the Mclean Farm project, a conservative estimate of net profit, not including soft costs and financing, suggests a profit range of $100 to $200 million at full build-out. Now, I think that's a lot of profit for a classic example of urban sprawl. Council has received copies of our longer submission to the Minister of Municipal Affairs and Housing, Steve Clark, which includes specific details of our objections to the zoning order requests for both the Mclean Farm subdivision on Penetanguishene Road, that's in Oro-Medonte Township, and the County of Simcoe Waste Processing Facility on Horseshoe Valley Road, which is in Springwater Township. Using the lack of normal public meetings and the lack of public and media attention to significant planning issues, mainly due to the immense distraction of the COVID-19 pandemic, is a significant and sad denial of our democratic processes in Ontario. That this behavior has been supported by some of our local municipal councils and county council, with the apparent encouragement of our provincial government, as a supposed means to economic recovery from the pandemic, is even more disturbing. In response to the COVID-19 pandemic, we need new thinking about our real societal needs and values, not to just fall back on old ideas to rev up the economic engine and be open for business at any cost. Near the start of my planning career at Queen's Park, I was taught that just because you have the legal authority to take some action, it does not necessarily make that action right. We urge the province to refrain from using zoning orders to override statutory requirements for public notice, public consultation, and public appeals. No level of government should treat both established environmental or planning policies and regulations and public involvement in land use planning as annoying nuisances which need to be avoided, ignored, or trampled on. To do so is bad process, bad planning, and bad politics. I encourage viewers of this virtual council meeting to email Minister Steve Clark and your local MPP to support the objections raised by the City of Barrie and by Nature Barrie to this use of Minister's zoning orders. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. McNair. Any questions of the deputant, Councillor Morales?
What does that mean?
Yep, go ahead, Councilor Morales.
Perfect. Thank you, Mayor Lehman. To Mr. McNair, you brought up a point about potential profit of this project. And as somebody with a planning background, I just want to ask you, since when is the amount of profit a potential development application, since when is that a component of consideration for proper planning?
Well, if we were having proper planning using minister's zoning orders, Councillor Morales, then it would be a very significant contribution to that discussion, because this is something that has avoided an entire democratic political process. It's something that has nobody knows about it. There's almost no media reporting on these things, and it's being done while everybody is concerned about their livelihood and potentially their health as a result of COVID-19. So if we had proper thorough planning reports on proper applications that went through a proper process, the amount of profit would be far less of a concern to anyone. But we do not have any of those things in this process.
Okay, so appreciate your answer. It's been a long day, so I think I might have just asked my question poorly. Would you feel more comfortable with said Apple? You brought it up, so I just want to get clarity on this. Would you feel more comfortable with this proposal if it were making more profit, less profit, no profit at all? The reason why I'm asking my question is the viability of the planning merits of an application. I rarely have heard proponents or opponents bring into question speculative numbers about profit. It doesn't, in my experience, it doesn't seem to be an underlying factor. But so in your experience, would you think the project is more viable if it was making less profit, same profit, more profit? I want to understand the reason why you brought that line up, because a number of 100 to 200 million, which I've never seen a variance of $100 million. It's never been part of the planning process.
Councillor Morales, if you or the proponents would like to supply some other numbers, I'd be happy to hear them. They were not. This process is an end run around everything that we understand and everything that I've worked in my career of nearly 50 years in the planning field. And I think it is entirely legitimate to make the public and council aware of how much of a windfall this process of zoning orders can create for the chosen landowner, and who gets to choose and why, and who profits and who benefits. And that, to me, that is just a total abusive process. And that's
okay.
why
So Mr. McNair, I appreciate, I'm going to stop you both there. I appreciate the answer. The purpose of deputations is not to get into debate, and given this deputant was here to support a motion on the floor, I think we'll call an end to that line of questioning. I'm sure that point of principle, while very important, could be debated at length tonight. Are there any other questions for the deputant? Okay, then I will thank you, Mr. McNair, for coming and giving us your views. Moving along with council. Moving along with council's agenda tonight, we have no tax application or communication matters, which brings us to the committee reports, and I'll ask the deputy mayor to move the committee reports from earlier tonight.
Moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Thompson. The general committee report dated August 10th, 2020, now circulated, be adopted. Section A.
Thank you. It's moved by Deputy Mayor Ward and seconded by Councillor Thompson that Section A, the General Committee report dated August 10th, 2020, now circulated, be adopted. That is with regards to the consent items that were approved by General Committee earlier tonight. Are there any comments or questions on Section A? Okay, seeing none, I'll ask you to indicate those in favor of Section A. Are any members opposed? None. That carries unanimously. Deputy Mayor Ward, Section B.
Moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Thompson. The Section B of the General Committee report dated August 10th, 2020 be adopted.
Thank you. It's moved by Deputy Mayor Ward, seconded by Councillor Thompson, that Section B of the General Committee Report dated August 10th, 2020 be adopted. This is with regards to the Mclean property MZO. Final technical comments. Any further comments, questions? Councillor Morales, anyone? Nope. I'll call the question. Those in favor of the item, of the motion? Any opposed to the motion? Seeing none, that's carried unanimously by those voting. Section C, please.
Moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Thompson, the Section C of the General Committee Report dated August 10th, 2020 be adopted.
Thank you. It is moved by Deputy Mayor Ward, seconded by Councillor Thompson, that Section C of the General Committee Report dated August 10th be adopted. These were the two items for discussion that were held. The review of the parks use bylaw and public property bylaws, that motion was defeated. The conversion of the Red Path Hopscotch Foursquare Court to Pickleball, that was the one that had Greenfield Park added. That's what's on the floor. Any comments or questions? Okay, seeing none, I'll call the vote. Those in favor of Section C? Any opposed? None, that carries. Section D, please.
Is there a Section D?
Sorry, we don't have a Section D. Nope. Thank you very much. Great work. Thanks, Deputy Mayor Ward. All right, that completes the committee report from earlier tonight. We have no deferred business. Now, I'd like to ask Council's indulgence to reverse the next two items on the agenda, and I'll tell you why. We have a presentation. The first presentation is by Shaq's World regarding her basketball camps. And the second one is a staff presentation regarding transit on demand. I would like to ask Council's indulgence to hear the first presentation and then entertain a direct motion without notice. There is a reason for that. Ms. Edwards camps, it's midsummer and there is an opportunity in 2020 for her. I would simply like to be able to get a motion on the floor at tonight's meeting. My apologies for not having that ahead of time, but with your indulgence, members of council, I'd like to hear the presentation and then at least put the motion on the floor for your discussion. Is there any objection to hearing the first presentation before direct motions? Okay. Not seeing any objection. So with that, we'll move directly to the first presentation, which is by Shaq from Shaq's World regarding her basketball camps. Ms. Edwards, welcome to Barrie City Council. Mr. McCara, welcome to council, and the floor is yours.
Oh, can everyone hear me? Can everyone hear me? Awesome. Thanks so much for having us, guys. I'm really excited to bring this vision to council. I've spoken to a few council members about this in the past, so I'm excited to finally be here and have the opportunity to share this with you all. So I've put together a little slide deck here. Did you receive the printouts from Wendy? Did she print those out or send them out? Did you guys get those? Because I sent them to her today. So if you didn't get them, that's so okay.
Not yet. Not yet.
Okay, so I'm just gonna.
We'll circulate them.
No, that's okay, because I'm gonna just put it up on the screen here. I was just wondering which version you guys had.
Hi, can you guys hear me as well? Perfect, thank you. You got it up?
Yeah, just 1 second. Sorry everyone for the technical difficulties. So today we are talking about the Shaq's World Community Center. And in a second here, I should have it open.
Let's share the screen.
Yeah. Okay. Okay, that version's not working. Really sorry about this, guys. I know I'm on a time limit. This is probably the worst thing that could happen right now. As if I was.
Shaq, you're okay.
Okay.
Just open it up. We'll get it going so they can see what you need them to see. If you can't get the screen up, then we can start and you can present.
Okay. Okay, I have one version up here. I'll just use this one.
Okay. Perfect.
All right. So again, sorry about that, guys. But again, thank you for coming and listening to the Shaq's World Community Center project idea. And Shaq's World has been in Simcoe County, empowering youth to stay humble and kind. Today's mission is, well, our mission is to bring awareness to youth mental health through sports, mentorship, and community. I'll run through a little bit of history on Shaq's World. Our principles are respect, integrity, discipline, and accountability. Some history on Shaq's World is, my name is Shanika Edwards. I am the founder and president of the Stay Humble and Kind World. I was raised in Innisfil, Ontario, attended Alcona Glen Elementary School, and graduated from Nantyre Shores. So I have a really good idea of how all of the systems work for youth here in Simcoe County, especially marginalized youth. I was CTV Barrie's Athlete of the Week and a youth mentor for the Innisfil Community Church for years throughout my career here in Simcoe County, before going off to study psychology and behavioral science, where I learned about the connection between sport and mental health. Once I finished studies, I moved back to Innisfil, where I became the first recreational basketball program in partnership with the town of Innisfil, bringing the Shaq's World basketball program to the youth in that community. We've evolved from coaching. When I started coaching, I was 14 years old and I coached house league and summer camps. I went on to college to then start facilitating my own summer camps throughout the summer, where I learned a little bit of the background and also fell in love with the atmosphere of becoming that role model and mentor for kids. When I moved home, as mentioned, I got my very first contract with the town of Innisfil to facilitate that basketball program. After that opportunity, I went on to start my very own basketball program called Elite Academy Basketball, where we trained athletes here in Barrie to strengthen their mind and their bodies, as well as showcase the talent that we have here in Barrie, because I found that athletes within Simcoe County did not have the same opportunity as athletes in the GTA when it came to basketball. From there, it came to our attention that there were a lot of youth and there were a lot of families that were concerned about the mental health within our community, which is where Shaq's World came from. In 2017, we held our very first Cure Courts event, which is a youth mental health awareness basketball tournament that we hold annually here in Barrie. And the proceeds from that event go to the Canadian Mental Health Association to help them further their programming. With that being said, that's something that we were able to do, a gap we were able to fill over the past few years. And something that we've noticed is that the mental health concerns in our community are on the rise, and the satisfactory rate is going down. We are hoping that we can fill the gap and give youth better access to local supports and mentors, as well as we've collaborated with organizations and businesses for years. So with that collaboration and with the partnerships that we've put together, now is a very, very good opportunity for us to come together and create that safe space for the youth in our community. You can see there on the screen, Youth Haven, CMHA, Family Connections, Empower Simcoe, New Path, and lots more organizations are excited to be a part of this once we are up and running. Here are a list of some of the past initiatives that we have done. So I've already mentioned our Cure Courts basketball tournament where the proceeds are donated to CMHA, but we also do workshops within the school board. We travel and do keynote speaking with Simcoe County School Board, the OPP, and Toronto District School Board, again, to promote that healthy mind, that healthy body that our program is promoting. So all of the initiatives that we've held in the past, the one thing that we try to make sure is evident is that there's togetherness, there's unity, and there's positivity for the youth participating. So we have potential programs. So these are programs that we would be able to start immediately once we are in the space. We have a CMHA drop-in program, a junior police academy, Black Youth Night featuring the Barrie Police, our junior MBA program, our scholarly elite tutoring service, our Shaq's World basketball programming, our Youth Haven community integration program, and so many more. To go into details on that, our CMHA drop-ins are actually happening now virtually, and we have a good group. And right now what we would like is to have a space that we can bring these kids together because they are struggling not only due to the fact that they're being isolated, but they also have nowhere to go to meet like-minded individuals. The Junior Police Academy is something that the Barrie Police and Shaq's World has worked on together over the past few weeks, and the Barrie Police would like to teach the youth of Simcoe County what it is to be a police officer, what it really means, as well as they would like the opportunity to learn from the youth within this community what they experience when they are dealing with police. We have the Barrie Police also wanting to do a Black Youth Night with the marginalized youth of Simcoe County. That would be ages 13 to 18 in collaboration with the police. They're hoping to fund this program and spend more time with the marginalized youth within this community and celebrate their cultures a few times a month. The Shaq's World basketball programming and junior NBA. So the Shaq's World basketball program is not only a basketball program, we actually do character building and we do agility testing for youth ages 7+. And then we are also role models and mentors. And I wrote this down actually in this book when I started Elite Academy 3 or 5 years ago. And it says, what is a role model? And then the definition that I wanted to give was a person other people look up to in order to help determine appropriate behaviors. A lot of youth nowadays, they turn to celebrities, athletes, musicians. They don't have someone local or someplace local that they can find the correct way to behave, and that's what we want to give them. Our Youth Haven community integration program is an opportunity for homeless youth to enjoy recreational programming and activities and promote a healthy lifestyle for them without feeling isolated. Those are just some program plans that could start immediately once we are in the space, but there are lots of programming plans that can happen within the next few months, including becoming the home to the National Basketball Mentorship Youth Program. We would host our annual charity events and fundraisers. So earlier, as mentioned, we do have about 3 annual events that we hold. All 3 do different things. We raise money for CMHA. We purchase basketball nets for the Women and Children's Shelter, as well as travel and give out prizes throughout the school board. So having a hub for all of those would be incredible. Hosting local workshops on different topics for parents and children. Again, Family Connections and a few of the other organizations are hoping to get to work with parents and children to help through COVID and hard times. Raptors basketball will become an official community partner. So Shaq's World is a partner of the Toronto Raptors, and we are hoping that with this space, we can bring them into the community as a larger community partner. We would expand our program, expand Shaq Talks, and have youth visit our facility and engage with our mentors. This would inspire them and motivate them towards their goals, their dreams, and potentially their greatness. So we're asking council to help us with 1 year of funding for this space. And then a few questions you might have is, how are we going to sustain this space after? So our financial plans moving forward, we are going to provide community rentals. So that's anybody in the community, that's birthday parties, buck and does, things like that. We have workshops, clinics that all 15 of these organizations would like to hold within the space, camps, grants, and community supports. And with those supports, it's organizations like CMHA, it's organizations like CAMH, it's organizations like Community Connections that is going to help us sustain this building once we are in there and running. And as far as our organization, we regularly meet right now. With this space, we would be able to meet on a more regular basis, as well as we would get to measure the impact that we are having on our community. Our biggest thing in the Stay Humble and Kind world is community and making sure that our youth know where they can go, who they can talk to, where their liaisons are, and know that there's a space that they can always come to if they need us. So in Shaq's world, we've been empowering youth to stay humble and kind through sports, mentorship, and community. We hope to continue to do that within this space. Thank you.
Shaq, thank you so much for the presentation. And just to ask off the top, the space that you've identified in the downtown, tell us about that.
Oh.
I don't think she.
Sorry, Shaq, I don't know if you could hear me. There was the
sound.
Yeah. You had identified, I think, the former youth center space at 59 Maple for this. Do you want to just talk about the space, the specific space that you'd like support from council to open?
Yes. So 59A Maple used to be the Community Homeless Center. The reason this space is perfect for us is because it already has a basketball gym in there. It already has space for mentorship, and it already has classrooms. We plan on turning one of the rooms into a lounge area so that the kids can sit there, and if they want to just hang out after school, or even because we don't know how school is going to go in September yet, if they are there for one day, or we don't really know the specifics, but within that space, we have the opportunity to do so much and bring so many different organizations together and give our youth a chance, really.
The goal is to create like an inclusive physical space where we can still maintain physical distancing and take all the necessary measures so that we could congregate safely, and to provide such a place where mental health through programming, mentorship and information can be accessed by the community members, by the youth. It's extremely important considering the climate of the Black Lives Matter, as well as just the isolation that a lot of youth are going through with being at home. We don't, like Shaq said, we don't know what's going to happen 10 weeks from now once school's back in place. So if there is a space where there's consistent and sustainable support, then we can move forward.
Okay, thank you. Questions from members of council? Councillor Morales.
Thank you, Mayor Lehman and Shaq. You're freaking incredible. I've had the opportunity to meet you last year, the year before, and I want to thank you for just the engagement and the passion that you bring to Barrie. In terms of your presentation and kind of what you're asking us for, we've had many community groups or partnerships kind of ask similar money support asks. I don't know if I can be supportive tonight. It doesn't mean I'm not supportive in general. And just what I mean by that is, like, I think of the bricks, I think of woodshop, I think of different projects in recent months.
So
we get information beforehand. So we get like a report, we get more thorough business plan than just the PowerPoint. We have opportunities to ask you questions that you probably do have the answers to, but like on a quick back and forth, a lot of that detail is lost in translation. So it would also be unfair for you because you would have that. So in terms of timing, unless it's like super crucial, which it sounds like it might be because of the school, the beginning of school. So I guess I'm gonna have a question for staff, and then staff, I'll ask the question to you and to your co-presenter. Staff, would it not be a more effective delivery model to partner with Shaq's World and maybe hire her as a consultant of sorts or as a service delivery of sorts, the way she kind of did with Innisfil, and do that and then allow her to use our facilities around the city, not just downtown, but in Holly and East, to get to different populations and kind of do it with our resources. Wouldn't there be more efficiencies and more control of the funds and just, economies of scale, instead of just giving the funds and letting Shaq replicate that? I think I would be a little more comfortable with that as well. I think we would empower Shaq and team to deliver the services better. I'm just kind of curious if there's a reason why Shaq would be more effective and team would be more effective with the check and then doing the work on their own, instead of retaining her as a consultant of some sorts. And that question is directed to city staff first, then Shaq, if you want to jump in.
Okay, staff, regarding the ability to bring this programming in-house through an existing facility or arrangement, I don't know, Mr. Prowse or Ms. McAlpine, if you would care to comment.
Thanks, Mayor Lehman. I'll take a crack at it, and then Ms. McAlpine can fill in if I've missed something. The item on the floor and the invitation came from the mayor's office, so I think it's probably fair to say, Councillor Morales, that staff haven't examined exhaustively any of those options. The option that's on the table is literally the option that's on the table. So city staff have not done any additional work. Certainly, we provide some similar services, and there is some continuity between what the city provides and what's being offered by Shaq's World, but we have not gone down the road of an in-bed, if you will.
Could it theoretically be possible, without saying yes, if this is the most optimal route, is it within the scope of reality that we could partner with Shaq's World and I don't want to say hire, but retain her as some sort of consultant or service delivery firm?
Well, I think it's fair to say that we have recreational facilities and we provide recreational programming. I think Shaq would offer that her programming is different than what we offer. And could be a complement, but we do have recreational facilities and we do have recreational programming, yes.
Okay, yeah, by no means are they the same programming, but Shaq, is there anything you want to kind of shed clarity on that?
Yeah, so I do want to say that I have been to almost every single rec center over the 5 years here and tried to partner with them. They just don't see where my program is helpful. And I think it's because it's more of a community-based program that's trying to fight a root cause as opposed to a recreational program. So yes, there's a physical aspect and there's absolutely an aspect of the fun mentorship side, but there's so much more behind it. So having our own physical location will also not only give us the opportunity to fully provide our services, but also give the opportunity for youth to find us in one space. Because that's a huge thing is, where can we find you guys? One of the things that I didn't mention in the presentation there is that Shaq's World has actually been going to different school gyms every week, multiple gyms a week, to have our training, to have our practices, because there isn't just one gym. All the gyms in Barrie are taken up by the two current basketball programs that are happening. But our program is a little different. So it's combating programs that people are looking at as basketball programs as opposed to a community initiative.
Mm-hmm. Okay, I'm just reading here. The motion, Councillor Alwyn sent it to me to fund, or proposed to possibly fund a 6-month lease. I would feel comfortable more working with staff and providing you that space in multiple locations. Again, for the benefits of the fact that it's multiple locations, multiple communities. I think if you were to, even though 59 Mapleview makes sense from basketball core, downtown core, you may not be reaching communities in Holly, in Painswick, in Allendale, in other areas so I think kind of that multi-pronged location would be beneficial. I think also we already pay for the gym as it is. We already pay for the rec centers. We pay for the heating. That said, staff might come back to us and say, we're running at 100% capacity. We can't do it in. So I think, personally speaking for myself, it might be wise to kind of take that step back, see if we can properly fit you into, very, very good space and timing. And if we can do that, in the rec center that we're already paying for regardless, and give you greater exposure I think that would be effective. Again, I'm supporting the general work, and I've always supported the work you've done. I'm just trying to find a kind of a logistical way to do this. So I'll let the rest of the members of council kind of chime in. I'm just kind of leaving that at that point.
So just before we move on, I do have a speakers list and we'll go through in process. Just to jump in here though, the process here is unusual, members of council, and I apologize that the motion that's in front of you had to come forward in this way, but there really wasn't any choice because of our timing and the fact that we're at the midsummer meeting. This opportunity presented itself after the final meeting of the spring session. Ms. Edwards has the opportunity to run her camps this year, and that's why we're in the unusual position of having to consider whether we would financially support them with a direct motion at City Council.
And I also
normally, sorry, Ms. Edwards, normally what we would be doing in this situation, of course, is we'd have an item at General Committee, the presentation would be at General Committee, and then we could just debate a motion as we would with other items. But we don't have that opportunity as the presentation is was scheduled for council. So it's awkward procedurally. I know that members of council probably would have preferred to be able to work with the motion without the constraints of council procedure, but that's where we are. The speakers list I've got, because we are at City Council and we only have 7 more minutes before the scheduled start of a Planning Act public meeting. What I will do is we'll delay the start of the Planning Act public meeting a little bit, but I have to ask that members of council keep their questions short at this point. We'll try and have the answers from the presenter rather than debating a potential motion. Then we will have to adjourn council and conduct the public meeting, and then we'll return to this item after the Planning Committee meeting. So at this point, I'll urge you to ask brief questions of the presenter, and then we can adjourn the council meeting and we'll deal with any resulting motion or amendments to those motions after the Planning Act public meeting.
I also want to just make another point to why it's important that we have this space. I sit on, so this morning I was on a call with sorry guys, my brain's going crazy. The developing community of Simcoe. So it's a group of people that are now trying to get the community together and unify us considering the current social climate. Right now, those groups that are working together to make this community whole are all run by marginalized individuals, whether Indigenous, Black, or people of color. Those people are all looking for a space as well. So having all of these things in one hub, and again, being someone that grew up in Simcoe County and know what it's like to be marginalized and not have access to resources or anywhere to find those resources, I think, and I believe that the community would believe this is an important place to have, just so that people don't have to go searching for where they can find us. They can go to one space. There's a hub, there's mental health support, there's mentorship, there's education, there's community, and it is different than a rec center. So I don't want to minimize my services by saying that we would fit into a rec center, because we are far too big to fit into any rec center that is the city currently has. We have a mission far greater than what we can do just inside a gym inside Holly Rec Center. I'm sorry. And we're trying to change a community. We're not trying to start a program. We're trying to change a community. You may not see the change in the next 6 months, but in the next year to 5 years, when this community changes to be the diverse community we know it's changing to be, this space is going to be needed. And we should have it now, not when they get here. And that's all.
Yeah.
Okay, I need to move on to questions from members of council with the time. Councillor Natalie Harris, question of the presenter.
Thank you, Mayor Lehman, sorry. And thank you for the presentation. Definitely was looking forward to watching it and to meeting you virtually. I've heard great things about you, obviously. I have a couple issues right now because my questions aren't brief. And I want to emphasize very clearly that I absolutely appreciate how you are working to assist marginalized communities. And I was trying to follow all of the things that you offer. And I honestly, my mind is kind of like, whoa, I'm not even sure where to start and what to, because if I put a yes vote up, I feel like obviously I would feel confident in what you're providing. And that doesn't mean that what you're providing isn't probably wonderful. I've just never heard of this program in this depth before. So my one question first would be, to staff first, are our summer day camps open yet as per the Simcoe District Health Unit? Yes. Okay, perfect. And for the junior police, the Barrie Junior Police, is that program run through the police service? Like, I'm not sure how that links to Shaq's World. I'm not even sure who.
In light of recent activities, so I was the MC at the Black Lives Matter rally on June 4th. From then, the Barrie Police reached out to me about how they could help. And one of the things that we discussed was creating a better relationship between them and the youth that they're supposed to be protecting. So because there are a lot of youth in this community who are Black, who want to be police officers, but do not want to go through the process. There was a mom that spoke about her son, an African boy who was in the Police Foundations program and was bullied so much he left. My brother took Police Foundations. He graduated with a lot of mental stress. He graduated, but it was a lot. So one thing that we want to get out of the Junior Police Academy is giving them an in-depth look of what it's like to be a police officer, and giving the police officers a perspective of what it's like to interact with them.
Okay, so my prior knowledge to the Junior Police Academy was that it was offered to all marginalized children. Is that still the case?
Yep.
So of all race, background.
Yep.
Okay, awesome.
The only thing that is restricted by race would be the Black Youth Night. And that would be 1 or 2 nights a month where the Barrie Police would have that time with those youth. And again, this is something that we're currently doing via Zoom, and all the kids and the police are very excited to move it to a physical space.
Thank you. And to staff, where would the funds come from? Would it be the Community Benefits Reserve?
So I'll handle that, Councillor Harris, because it's a political motion by myself. Yes, my intent would be after this presentation to put a motion on the floor for funding from the Community Benefit Reserve, and we can debate it at that time. But that was the funding source that I'd identified.
And how would someone go about joining the services? Do you have a website?
Yes, I could speak to that if possible. We would make an online registration form and disseminate it through emails and through social media. Fortunately, we have a rather large network that we can get to get the information out there. And then, yes, through the website, simple form registration. We would also have something in the space physically for them to pick up so that they can access brochures and registration.
Thank you. I will keep those questions to what I have now. Again, I honestly, I just feel kind of like disappointed that we didn't have more time to really learn instead of a 10-minute presentation of what the ins and outs are. And I read that you're not for profit.
Natalie, if you want to reach out to me later via email, feel free. Yeah. We can always.
I know, but later is after this direct motion that's coming up. So that's the problem, unfortunately for me, is I have so many questions still, and we have a direct motion that we need to vote on that we can't debate right after. So
no, we can debate it, Councillor Harris. Make no, absolutely we can, and I would expect that council, like any other motion, will want to discuss the details of it or potentially amendments. We're at council, so amendments have to be written down, but there's nothing saying you can't debate or amend the motion that I would be bringing forward later this evening. Absolutely.
One
Sorry,
My-
Mr. McCara, I need to move on with the speakers list and hold to the councillors. So, Councillor Harris?
Sorry, my apologies. I was under the impression that we couldn't debate a direct motion. So sorry about that, but
No,
I'll stop
absolutely.
now. Thanks.
Okay, Councillor Thompson, I have you next on the speakers list. And remember, we need to do some pretty quick questions here to the presenters. I do apologize that we've run out of time. We can ask Ms. Edwards to wait till after the Planning Act public meeting. It'll probably be an hour to 2 hours, but we can pick it up then. Why don't we do a few more questions? Councillor Thompson, go ahead.
Okay, my first question through you, Mayor Lehman, is actually something that COO Prouse had brought up, that this come through the mayor's office. And I hate to be the person that mentions it, but we talk so much about shift government and having a member of your office. Like, this is counterproductive of a shift government. This is 100% government coming to us for the ask. In light of time, and I'll be real quick and then everybody can answer appropriately. Has this group reached out to Canadian Tire Kickstart? Have they reached out to the Raptor community program that helps with basketball camps and stuff? Have they applied for a Trillium grant? How do you expect to get it up and running? Like, if it's so in need of time without a website, to get a mailing list? And another thing too, have you worked with the health unit and got the approval in light of the COVID with, like, I know every organization has to put forward and mitigated strategies and plans before they can go ahead with anything. And truth be told, and I've reached out to Ms. McAlpine about this, we have a rec center in Lantman attached to Andrew Hunter that is very underutilized and in a community that probably could really help with something like this. Because let's be honest, the youth in the downtown is not, we've done everything to remove the youth, taken all the schools, and the youth that are in the surrounding areas. And if we're dealing with marginalized, it's hard for people to get downtown, where in communities, like, parents aren't going to drive them and stuff. So I'll leave them, I'll be real quick, and then if you want to answer, or we can leave it till after, but just those questions. Thanks.
Okay, so Shaq, the questions are around which funds you've applied for support from and the potential to use Lampman Lane.
So yes, we have reached out to the Kickstart program. They often subsidize the cost of rep fees. We are not a recreational basketball program. We are a community program that uses basketball as a way to get the mental health in the community at the forefront. And as far as Lampman Lane, it does not give us enough room to have the other organizations, including Simcoe, Empower Simcoe, Our Mosaic Lives, Uplift Black, all of those communities are also looking for a space, and Lampman Lane just doesn't give us enough space. I hope that answers your question.
On a 6-month lease.
And we have applied for grants, yes.
Okay. I just think, like, this is back down that rabbit hole. And you know, I've heard great things about you, and I would be comfortable supporting the organization, but just maybe not the funding. And I know that's probably not what you want to hear, but like, I look around, like, our legions are struggling to stay opened.
Our youth are struggling with their mental health.
I 100%.
Right. Mr. McCary, can we let the councillor finish his remarks, please? Go ahead, Mr. Thompson.
So, and like I said, I realize it's a big picture, and like, we'll be supportive, but I just think it's so rushed, where youth, the mental illness of youth has not just occurred in the last months. This is something that's been going on. We actually have a counselor who belongs to New Path and who's doing great work in that sense as well. But like, I look at the mentoring, big brothers, big sisters. We have basketball camps. Is there no way we can join together for, I hate the whole siloed services, where I just think as a community, we need to come together. And I don't like entering into leases in private buildings. We're a government agency. We're, you know, and we shouldn't do that. So I'll leave it there. I don't want to take up too much time and I apologize for being short.
Okay, thanks, Councillor Thompson. Councillor Harvey, you're next.
Thank you, Your Worship. First, I'd just like to say, as a member from the law enforcement community, I'm appalled that your brother and friends have had the experience that they have through the community college programs while they're going through the law and security program, because we always struggle trying to attract people from the diverse groups to even apply to the police agencies. But on the positive side, I have seen similar programs in the GTA that have been extremely successful doing similar things like what you just spoke about. However, your program does seem to be a lot more robust with a lot more parts involved with it when it comes to especially the mental health piece of it. So I'm very supportive of it, but I then also have to put my council hat on too, where we've had these asks from other groups and it happens to be the same location. And a couple of the questions Councillor Thompson asked were exactly where I was going to go about funding, other funding sources. But when it comes to your actual company, because I cannot find anything online anywhere other than I know I've seen a Facebook page that had popped up a while ago, but there's no website or anything of that.
It's shacksworld.com, shaksworld.com.
I do apologize. Like I was just asking a question and I think there's just been a little bit too much interruption when we've been asking questions, and we pay you the same respect too.
Just trying to get you the website. I'm very sorry.
Yeah, okay, no worries. But like, are you registered as a not-for-profit? Is it a not-for-profit corporation, or like how is it registered and things of that sort? Because if there's going to be a financial ask coming, obviously that's something that we have to be comfortable with, is the fact that these dollars are going to be dealt with appropriately.
Shaq, you are a registered not-for-profit, correct me if I'm wrong?
Yes, I am a registered not-for-profit, and I also sit on the board of another registered not-for-profit and a charity that is also a basketball youth charity that I work with. So yes, Shaq's World is a registered not-for-profit, and we have been doing charity work for 5 years.
Just for curiosity, as a follow-up, is it registered under Shaq's World? Just because while you were talking, I have searched the CRA list and I couldn't find anything. So that was the reason for my question.
Yeah, so Shaq's World Association is the full name.
Okay, great. Thank you.
No problem.
Okay, are there any other questions of the presenters? Councillor Jim Harris.
Great. Thank you, Mayor Lehman. And Shaq, you know, I've only had the pleasure of meeting you virtually, so here we are again. And I really, first of all, I feel frustrated and significantly restrained and constrained by the method by which we've been asked to adjudicate this potential ask. I mean, what we've learned, I think, recently through our federal government is process matters. And I find what happens right now is this process is significantly compromised. It's compromising you, quite frankly. And for that, I don't know what to say. You know, you have incredible passion, skills, energy, commitment. I know you work with CMHA, I saw your recent groups you're doing with them. And I'm just sitting here thinking, wow, we've got this potential, we've got this asset in our community, and we've got this really poorly kind of time-constrained ask. I thought it was a presentation to council, so now it's an ask, I get it. So I'm trying to move my head to that. So I have so many questions. There's so many opportunities that just come to mind with this. And I've had the responsibility of struggling and competing to get funds for whether it be federal, provincial, county for programs for many, many years. So I understand the challenge to get funds. I just want to ask a bit about your sustainability plan. If you had this 6 months, what's the sustainability plan to move forward to continue to be viable?
Well, after conversations this morning with as mentioned, the organizations that are trying to create a better community, they have mentioned that they will step in as people to help with funding once we are in the space and we are settled into the space, as well as the Raptors basketball as official community partners of Shaq's World will step in and help us with renovations and funding. We also have about 10 other organizations that are not-for-profits that are looking for space and have worked with Shaq's World for years and have been unsuccessful with finding any other place. And so there are plenty of different avenues in terms of sustainability and revenue once we are actually in the space.
Right. So I hear you locked into this space. Can you give us a sense of how much work and planning has gone into thinking about utilizing this space? And how much time would you be needed to be able to say, hey, here's the ask for this renovation you've talked about, or do you have proposals already in for renovations to Trillium or other organizations that fund youth work and sports?
I'm so sorry that I keep on jumping in.
Okay,
well, I actually was the operations manager at the Community Homeless Center 3 years ago. So that's when this plan first started. And I actually have a brochure of that, of my original plan from 3 years ago of offering music, dance, art, all of that in that facility before it was closed down. As soon as it was closed down, I actually spoke to Jeff about reopening it as a Shaq's World, and it never happened. I want to point out right now that if that happened 2 years ago, right now, those marginalized youth would not feel the way that they feel. But we have an opportunity to bring it forward before more youth move to this community. And I am willing to answer any questions you guys have. And I know we don't have much time. I would love to do a follow-up. I would love to answer all these questions, because I think that if you guys see the complete plan, there wouldn't be these questions. And if you see the amount of work that's gone into it, there wouldn't be these questions.
So just one more question, if I can. I mean, I'm being asked to make a decision pretty soon with real information from a really wonderful community member who I may be about to let down because I don't have process to guide me through this, which is really disappointing and frustrating. Shaq, have you reached out? You mentioned organizations that are both well-funded, millions of dollars of funding, and also property owners who have a fair bit of available money through fundraising, other means. CMHA, for example, Power Simcoe, two large land holders. Have you approached them about providing some ongoing support to leasing this? You talked about servicing their population through this great program. Have they been approached to say, listen, the city's got space. Can you guys put down some money? They have money. Let me tell you, I can tell you that.
Well, and that's where I say that once we're in the space, the sustainability will be no problem. I do volunteer with CMHA on Thursdays in their youth program, and the #1 problem they have with their youth program is the fact that the CMHA on Ann Street is in an industrial building. So those kids are meeting in a garage. Half the time they don't want to be there, it's cold in there, and it's not an inviting youth center feel. It's more of an institutionalized feel where they're going to talk to counselors and things like that. The opportunity that we would have with this space is to give them a chance to come into a building with CMHA, because they will be joining us in the new space, but they would come in and they would have professionals on site, and they would be in a building where they don't feel like they're institutionalized and being forced to talk, where they can just come in.
That building, they are currently raising funds to renovate that building to make it into a youth center. So there's a lot of hope for that building, which then would they not be using your building? My question would be, why isn't CMHA paying you?
My question is always the same thing.
Well, you know what? Somebody CMHA might be watching, but I would suggest that given what you're doing, I suggest that they should be paying you for your time and your expertise. I think that's very important to hear.
I don't really expect to be paid for it, because the mission in Shaq's World is to create a better community and to empower people to stay humble and kind. So receiving funds for myself is not really the mission here. The mission here is so that people see that the benefit of this program, the passion behind this program, and the change we're trying to create. Once they see that, again, once we're in the space, there will be these questions would not be.
Okay, I need to, sorry, Councillor Harris, we're 15 minutes late starting planning committee. So I'm going to call a halt at this point. I hear your frustration, Jim, Councillor Thompson, others. This is the problem with under COVID, we have no reference or advisory committee meetings at all. We haven't had any. All we've got is general planning and council. And during the summer, all we've got is one general committee and council meeting. So I take full responsibility for how this came forward. The opportunity arose after the end of the spring session. It was either put Shaq in front of you now and discuss whether we can support her or not until September. I'm hearing clearly two things, that members of council like what they are hearing about the potential to make positive change in our community and want to be supportive, but need a lot more information perhaps before they get to that point. So that is fair, but I would tell you that under our process, there's literally no choice. This would have been an ideal presentation with follow-up discussion about how we might support or which staff to bring into the discussion or which facility to have at the reference committee. But both because of COVID and because of the summer, it simply wasn't possible. So we need to start our planning committee meeting. I will do some thinking about what, if any, a direct motion to bring forward after planning committee when we reconvene as city council. If you have frustration about the process, you can take it out on me. Please don't take it out on the presenter. But look, it's COVID, it's the summer. There was no choice if we were to get this idea in front of you tonight. So I'll do some thinking about that. I want to thank Shaq and Mr. McCara for being here tonight. Sorry, there is an echo. Can I just ask? Yeah, okay, there we go. I'll thank the presenters for being here tonight. I will ask if you can come back on to the council call after planning committee adjourns tonight, in the hopes of at least providing some response and or direction to the presentation. Yes. And at this point, I need to adjourn council to allow us to move to planning committee. Ms. Cook, is that in order?
Yes, Mayor Lehman, it is. Just a reminder to members of council that they will need to log off of this meeting and log on to the separate link for the planning meeting. That link will be provided, a new link will be provided to the representatives of Shaq's World so that they can participate after planning.
Thank you.
Okay, so thank you to the presenters. Apologies that our process didn't allow the kind of discussion that this deserved to this point, but we'll see where we can go after the planning committee meeting. With that, we'll adjourn city council. Everybody please log out and log back in for planning.